Hey everyone, Marianne Gillespie. All right, so you've been asking for a very simple way to explain to your clients how come this is all happening in the economy and why. And I hear all sorts of crazy ways of explaining it, so I'm going to give you the easiest way to explain it, something that your consumers will actually understand and make them understand that this isn't doom and gloom, okay? This is not doom and gloom. So I want to explain to clients is this. In 2019, most areas in Canada and around the world, but most areas in Canada were on its way into a seller's market. We were headed there. So about like anywhere from 3, 4, 5% increase in pricing. Hot areas were definitely still hot and they'll always be hot. But you're seeing that in 2019 we were headed there. Now what happened is the pandemic happened. So they adjusted interest rates, brought them way down to 2% and whatnot. And they did that because they had to stimulate the economy. So they had to get people to borrow and spend money because otherwise the economy would have crashed. It would have been a very bad outcome. So what ended up happening though is they didn't realize the demand in the real estate market was so strong. You know, they probably didn't have time to really look at that, or they did and they weren't able to make a decision that would have been good for that market as well as stimulating the economy. So when you brought it down to 2%, it stimulated the real estate market and it took that demand and it surged it. And what we had was the pricing, because of that demand and the low interest rates, it caused the perfect storm. It bumped pricing up almost 10 years in advance. So it wasn't that the houses were not going to get to that price, it's just you fast forwarded it. So think of it that way. You overstimulated the real estate market pricing so that it basically in a 3-year span, it increased pricing by 10 years. So what ended up happening is that was almost a 40% increase in some areas. So they started bringing the interest rates up, started bringing the balance down a little bit, and then you had about a 20% adjustment. And what's happening now is there's just going to be some further increases in interest. Yes, it's going to help with inflation and whatnot, but it's also going to bring the prices back to about where they should have been, which is a natural 3-year progression. So they're not going back to 2019 pricing, but it is becoming more affordable as if it was a natural 3-year progression. And that's what's happening in pricing right now. So even if you bought a house during COVID, if you're staying in it, eventually it's going to get to the prices again. Okay, so you don't need to panic about that. This is kind of like having a snapshot into the future. So they stimulated it. It went 10 years in advance in pricing. Now they have to bring it back down because what happened is that 10-year jump made it way too unaffordable for the general popularity of the population. Sorry, I didn't mean popularity, but the general population couldn't afford it. So what ended up happening is that they got priced out of the market. You hear all these horror stories about people not being able to afford houses. So by bringing it back down, you're allowing people to gradually have the price increase that we were experiencing pre-COVID, but also you're allowing more people to get into the real estate market. And that's a normal thing that's going to happen. I think personally it's a very smart idea because you can't have a 10-year jump in pricing. Again, it just takes everybody out of the market that deserves to be in the market, in my opinion. So that's kind of how I'm explaining to clients and saying, so if you want to sell and you want to capitalize on all the equity, that 10-year jump, you've got, a good chance to still capitalize on that equity and sell. It's an amazing time to do that. Or if you hold on longer term, you are still going to see those prices come back because of the demand in the marketplace. So it's very easy to explain to clients. Again, 2019, we were already headed into a hot seller's market. We were on our way there. Look at all the stats. And then when the pandemic hit, they lowered the interest rates. Perfect storm happened. We jumped 10 years in advance in pricing. Then the government's like, we got to adjust this because it was way too fast and way too unaffordable for people, which I think we all can agree. They're bringing it back down. Okay, they're bringing it back down, and then they're going to allow it to increase naturally, which will allow the population to save, get into the market, and that's honestly what should happen. So there's no doom or gloom. This is basically fixing a mistake that the government did, but in the end, they really didn't have much of a choice. They had to do it. They had to keep the economy going. Global pandemics are something that, you know what, we can all look back on hindsight and say, wow, we wouldn't have done this, we wouldn't have done that. But let's be fair, in the moment, I mean, they had to make decisions that were the best for the entire country, and at the time that was one of the best solutions that normally would have worked. They just underestimated the demand of the marketplace, especially in places like Ontario and British Columbia. And you will still see some areas that were hot before will still always be hot. If they were unaffordable before, they're still going to be unaffordable. So that's the other thing you have to think about too. But in essence, don't worry, everything is going to get back to where it is. So even if you did buy and you're like, man, my house is going down in value, value. You don't have to panic. It will get itself back there, okay? It's just they're bringing us back, allowing it to progress the way it should have progressed, which is the natural way it should be done, okay? So, you know what? There's an easy way how to explain to your clients. Try not to get too technical with them. It is really just as simple as what I've just said, and you know what? It may be a little bit painful correcting it, but understand that the correction will allow a lot more people to get into the real estate market, and a lot of people are still sitting. Don't forget, you're still sitting on huge amounts of equity. Canadians are very, very lucky. We're not going back to 2019 pricing. Remember that. So you still have tons of equity. You still have tons of opportunity to do things with your property, and I hope this explanation helps you guys.